All right, on to session number 2 here of the Ceph Developer Summit. Looks like this one is the Rados Gateway for the new multi-site sync. So Yehuda or Orit, you guys want to give us an overview of what this is?
Yeah, Orit, if you want to start with that issue, we kind of split it into 2 different big chunks, and one deals with configuration and one deals with the actual data sync. So, Orit, you want to start discussing the configuration? Did we lose Orit?
We lost Orit, yeah.
Hi, sorry.
Yeah, all right. So go ahead, Orit, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk today about the new multi-site configuration. This is my first developer summit. So we'll go over the blueprint, basic definitions. We call a zone a collection of pools and gateways that are in the same cluster and serve the same data. We will rename region to be called the zone group, and so they won't be mixed up in the name. So zone group is a group of zones that replicate to and from each other.
The problem that we were having was that people were confusing the collections of zones with actual geographical area, and that because of the term region, that's why we decided to just rename it to zone group. We were following earlier other semantics that doesn't really necessarily apply in different configurations and setups. So we'd rather be more explicit with the term zone group, right? Wait. Wait, did we lose you again? Okay, I'll try to continue. We now add a new thing called a zone realm, which is basically a collection of zone groups that share the same user and bucket namespace, and that's mainly being used so that we can create different realms with different regions on the same Ceph clusters. Wait a second. Same switching. The next thing that we're adding is called a period, and period is a period of time in which there is a specific zone group configuration that is in effect. A zone group configuration details the layout of the realm, and for every region map, for every zone group map, we're gonna have a single master for the metadata, that is controlling it. But sometimes we'd want to be able to change that because regions we might want to flip the region's master, the previous slave, to become the new master for certain reasons. And in that case, we'd create a new period, and we'd need to take care of that, and that will help us taking care of the different actions that we need to take in order to make sure that all the data is valid. So we define a period as the time where a specific region map is in effect, but it can also be versioned. So you can be in one period, and there can be different versions for that period because you still have the same master, same zone group master, but different zones were added or removed. So in that case, you just increase the epoch. Do we by any chance have Orit again? Right. Okay, what would the zone map hold? So each period, so it's gonna be a map of the entire, not the entire system, because you can have different realms, but it's gonna lay out the specific realm, and it'll hold all the connections and relations between the zone group and the zone groups and all sorts of other configurations. So the period will have the UID of the specific period, the epoch, which period precedes it, and very important is the version vector for the previous period's metadata log. So, and we'll go over it later. Oh, here's our, wait.
Hi.
Hey.
I hope I'm going to stay on. Yeah, I disconnected from the VPN. I hope it will help. So we have the vector of the previous period metalog, and of course all the list of the zone group that are part of this period. The zone group that is the metadata server. We want one point to actually handle all metadata updates, and there will be a specific zone group that will be the metadata master and a specific zone in the zone. Which zones are at each zone group at this period. It's like a view of the site, and which zone is the master for each zone groups. As for the realm, we have ID and name for realm. We have an ID, so user will be able to rename the realm without need to change it. So every reference in the pool will be actually with ID, and we'll just have a name that points to the ID. The zone group that is master for the metadata, user bucket metadata, list of the zone groups in the realms, and the current period for the realm. That means where are we now? For each zone group, we'll have again ID and name, so user can rename the zone group. All the access URLs, and storage policy or placements, which is the zone for the master metadata.
Mm-hmm. Right. The storage policies are defined on the zone group, so we'll be able to add and remove storage policies, which we can already do it right now, but hopefully it's going to be simpler to configure.
The master for the metadata for the zone group, and we're going to support active, passive. So which zone are the master, which zone are the slaves, and all the zones in the zone groups. For each zone, we have the ID and name, again, trilary name, the access URL, and all its peers. Peers are actually zones that it's connected to. We won't have to have a full mesh, but we need connectivity between all the zones in the zone group to be able to reach everybody.
Right.
So the master in the master zone in the master zone group will actually manage all the metadata changes, and as we already have one big master, it also will control all the changes to the zone group map, meaning adding zone group, changing all the stuff. So in order to make some change in the configuration, the command will send the URL to this user URL to the master, and the master will actually change the configuration and will propagate it to all the rest of the system. We want that the gateway will be able to handle dynamical changes to the configuration. At the moment we need to restart it, we hope to change it, that we can actually change the configuration, and we underneath will create a new backend and we'll be able to use the new configuration.
Right, so the gateway is gonna
every time there's
we have some flag. So the gateways are gonna identify the fact that there was some kind of change, and they're gonna flash down all their current operations, and once that's done, they're gonna internally restart, create a new RGW Rados object that will work with the new configuration. Wait. Did we lose the rate again?
Looks like it says our video is showing, but I see no video, so that's usually an indication that somebody has crashed out.
Yeah, that's right. I should stop talking. It happens every time I talk. All right. So let me see if I can speak up. So it's gonna propagate, and the dynamically reconfigure themselves. And as we said earlier, the zone group map is gonna have a version epoch that will increment after every change. Now, that's pretty much the new configuration structures, and some of it is already old configuration, some of it is a new configuration. We're gonna retain mostly the zone structure, the zone group structures, but we're adding the new period and realm stuff, and the interactions are gonna be a bit different. For example, we'll need to be able to propagate the zone group map from the master of the masters into all the other zones and all the other entities in the system, and we're gonna do it by both pool operations that the entities will be able to pull that data, and which they can already do now, but there are also going to be push messages. So now, we also try to simplify all the configuration, make it so that currently, in order to set up multi-site RGW setup, there is a document with, I think, 20 or 30 steps, and we really want to try to make it much simpler. So at a high level, it's gonna look like something like initially you're gonna define a realm, gonna define a zone group, you're gonna create a zone, and but you're gonna do it through the admin commands without needing to inject all sorts of JSON objects, stuff like that. Great, you want to continue?
Yeah. So I'm not sure where we are exactly, but I'm thinking we are in the defining the new zone group.
Mm-hmm.
So when we want to create a new zone group, instead of the JSON, it will be just a command, as you just said, and we'll keep an ID for the zone group, so that way user can rename the zone group if they want to. We need to have backward compatibility. That means for all zone groups that already exist, we just make the name and ID the same. When you set a new zone group, you have to tell the command line which is the master zone group, because that's the zone group that's responsible of propagating all the configuration changes in the site, multi-site. For the default zone group, then you have to specify it in the command line. For the other, I think after we know who's the master, you don't have to specify it.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it for zone groups. When you create a zone group, after that we create a new zone and we can add it to a specific zone group. It doesn't have to be one, actually. And so today, when we create a new zone, we read the configuration and then check the root pool to see the configuration. And if it doesn't exist, we read the default zone, and if it doesn't exist, we actually create everything. I think we're gonna stop doing that. There will be no defaults. Actually, everything will be created by the user. And also to allow, today we cannot rename a zone because all the names are in the reduce objects. So in order to allow that, we will use an ID. The ID will be created when we create a zone. It will be static, and there will be a name object that will point to the ID. When we rename, we just change the name, and it still will point to the same ID. We also, again, everything should be dynamic. So if you change the configuration, you don't have to restart all the gateways, but we'll actually use some watch notify to identify changes, or the master zone group will actually notify all the other zone groups to let the configuration changes. Let's see if something missing. So every time we create a zone group starts, we need to auto-create the pools we need, and the naming is here. It will be, I think, the same, maybe without the period in the beginning. So it will be zone ID x pool name, and we'll have all the same thing we have today: the bucket ID metadata, the users index, the bucket data, garbage trays, and so on.
Right. Now, you want to talk about how period is being defined?
Yeah. You mean that we won't use a period for the pool names? No, the object period. So period is actually well, when you create a realm, there will be we create automatically a period, and every time there's a change that requires some synchronization, usually, let's say we change the master zone group, or unfortunately the master fails and we need to change the master again, those will create a new period. In other cases, like configuration change, that won't create a new period, but will actually will increase the epoch and know that the configuration is a bit different. And we will anyway, we'll need some admin commands to handle the new period creation. So, and when we switch to a different period, we may need to synchronize stuff, or at least see what state we are. Not always we can synchronize from a remote. So that's about the period. So this means that admin actually will need to access different gateways, and we'll need a way for the admin to communicate with different gateways, and probably all the API will be REST API. That's about it.
Yeah, well, so when you configure a period on the master of masters, you're gonna do it through Rados Gateway Admin, and that's gonna communicate with the Rados gateways on that specific zone. But for it to be propagated into the different zones in the system, there is going to be some RESTful API for them to fetch the new data, and that should be including all the zones periodically pulling that information from the master. That's one thing, and the other thing would be for it to actually try to push that information. But since they're not necessarily connected in that direction, or there might be, so they also need to pull it.
Yeah. But actually, we get into the REST API, so we'll have REST API to get a period information.
Mm-hmm.
It could be current period or specific period ID and epoch. And we'll run some API to actually tell the gateway that you need to fetch the period data. That will be a post REST API. And for zone, we need to initialize or update a new zone using either post with init zone or post with reconfigure. And for period, like you will prepare a period that will be local in the cluster. And when you want actually to spread it around, we'll have the activate command that will also do this, if needed, synchronization, and also will contact with other zone groups and gateways in the other zone groups and tell them they need to fetch the new period ID data, and they will need to use a pull command to get the information.
Yep. Right. So
one question here, Harish here. How much percentage improvement that we can see, like, I mean, in the sense of the complexity of configuring the federated gateway at this point of time is big, is huge. So what is the percentage that we can expect improvement here? I mean, is it like 50% of the complications or 40? Or what's the level?
Yeah, I don't see, we had examples of how to actually configure the system, but it's not in this, in the blueprint. The two issues that we're solving is, one is being able to do dynamic configuration, whereas before you needed to do a configuration and restarting all the gateways. So all that we're gonna save you all that stuff. But also the commands are gonna be more coherent and make sense in such a way that you don't need to inject JSON configurations that you edit manually anymore. So that's gonna also improve. And I think part of it's gonna part of the operations that currently we have, we're not gonna need them. I don't have the scheme right now, the complete scheme in my head, but some of it you're gonna just say, okay, fetch, pull the period from the master. There's going to be a command for it, and it'll just apply it on the current zone you're on. Whereas beforehand, you do our Redis gateway admin region map get, pipe it to a JSON, copy it to the remote to Redis gateway admin region map set, type, redirecting it from the JSON file, and restart the gateway. So so it's gonna be much simpler, much friendlier.
So
So did we capture some of the stuff in the notes in the pad?
We definitely didn't catch anything in the pad. I think.
Throw down some of these notes so we don't forget.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. So that's the with regard to the configuration. So it's really, if I had to sum it up, I'd say that we're trying to make it a more coherent process that actually makes sense. That's whereas before it was more of manually getting the system into a specific configuration that you'd need to know a lot about the system's internals. Whereas now it's more of a user-friendly setup. It's gonna capture some of the issues that we were dealing with before. I think we can move to the next topic, which is actually the actual think operations.
All right, let me get that switched over here so we have some separation.
Yeah.